quite often the young person will not want to miss out on anything. And sometimes it therefore falls to you as a parent to actually say no.
Tracy, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming back on. So, everyone listening, Tracy is a repeat guest. And last time she was on, we talked about overtraining, signs, symptoms, and how to manage overtraining. And we're going to expand on that topic today with athletes who are playing on 2 teams in a season. And I'm all for sampling multiple sports, but there's definitely some things to be aware of when your athlete is playing 2 sports in the same season, some possible overtraining and under recovery issues, and ways to just navigate it, because I think we should encourage our athletes to play multiple sports. But Tracy, would you agree now it's much harder to navigate in today's day and age because all sports are year round? So it's not like you can play one sport during the winter season and then another sport during spring. There's always going to be overlap.
Yeah, absolutely. There's more and more sports that are going kind of all year round, in various different guises. Sometimes, it changes. But I think it's really hard because the demands that each sport is placing upon that young person. If you're sampling and you're doing it in a recreational sense, that's different. But if you're doing multiple sports and actually competing within both of those sports, it can be quite a tricky thing to navigate, for the parent and for the young person. And we often find as well that the children who are doing that are often the children not only who are maybe doing 2 different sports, but are also maybe the ones who are being selected for school teams, doing even maybe then another sport. They might be playing volleyball for the school in addition to whatever 2 sports they're competing in as well. So yeah, it can be quite challenging to manage that, because there's not always the communication there between those different sports. So those coaches won't necessarily, they might be aware that that young person is doing another sport, but they won't always be asking, well, what did you do at training that week? What did you do last night? Or have you come straight from another training to this one? Are you doing it on the same day? So quite often they're very focused on what they're doing within their block of time that they've got you.
Yeah, and it's really hard for coaches to adjust that within a team setting because they come to practice with their plan and they want to include everyone. And the girl who's playing multiple sports, they can't really be like, yeah, like sit out of this drill and you go over here. Like she wants to participate too. So yeah, I guess how do we manage all this? Because I'm all for sampling. I played soccer and lacrosse in the same season for a while, but one of them was like less serious than the other. So
Yeah.
lacrosse was more rec. The training volume wasn't as intense. So that did work for a while. But I guess for girls who are really competing hard in both sports, how do we manage it? And why is it a problem? Because a lot of people will be like, oh, kids can handle it. Hey guys, just want to take a quick moment to shout out our sponsor, Simply Faster, and one of my favorite speed timing systems from them, the Freelap. I use it for my own sprint training as well as for my athletes, and they love it. It's super easy to set up, you can take it to the field on your own, and you can get accurate speed times to track your progress. Check the Freelap link in the caption below to start adding timing into your speed sessions. If you know me, you know I love my Freelap. If you're serious about speed, it's time to start timing.
There's a few different things there, isn't there? So quite often as a younger child, they maybe have done multiple sports. And actually in younger children, there's some physiological reasons why that's more possible as well. So our body changes, our heart and lungs change as we begin to enter puberty. So we know that younger children can tend to run around for a long time. They don't get as fatigued. They can go on and on and on, can't they? And they also tend to recover better, so they don't get the same build up of things like lactic acid. And they actually also, their body gets rid of anything that is built up much more quickly. And then when we begin to hit puberty, some of that changes. So your body begins to develop into a bit more of an adult state. And for females, normally kind of mid-puberty, those things have reached a sort of adult level, and so you do begin to suffer a bit more from fatigue. You do need a little bit more recovery. Your body needs to adapt to that as well. So sometimes people will say, yeah, but that's what they've always done, so they're used to it, they can cope with it, it's fine. But actually the body's changing, and so our system needs that extra time for recovery and repair, that it maybe didn't need quite as much of when we were younger. So that's one thing to be aware of, is that just because they've been able to do it in the past doesn't mean that they still will. And so when they hit those puberty years, at some point that's going to begin to get a little bit harder. And that's before you take the actual growth part into account, because we know that when they're growing, when they're at that stage where they're having that adolescent growth spurt, they are more at risk of injury and things at that point as well. So there's this that kind of reason. And then there's also that, generally if you're within one sport, your coach will have their plan. There will be, a heavier day or a lighter day, or a day that's more intense, and then there will be recovery potentially planned in there. But if you're doing two sports, you can end up doing back-to-back really hard days, or you miss out on that recovery. So if you're competing in two different sports, you might have a competition in a morning and then another one in an afternoon, or you might have one both days at a weekend. So where you would normally then have a recovery day, post match, you're not maybe getting that. So, and then you're back into training again. So it's not getting the chance to recover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense with what's going on physiologically during the growth spurt. And then added on to puberty, there's more academic stress.
Yes.
The travel teams, they're practicing a lot more, and they're required to do more in tournaments and games. So it is a lot to take on. And that reminds me, when I decided to quit lacrosse and just specialize in soccer, I was like 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
I just couldn't handle the loads anymore. So by the time I got into high school, I was like, I'm just going to pick soccer because that's what I want to do in college. And
Yeah.
I had suffered a few overuse injuries from my last season of soccer and lacrosse overlapping, IT band syndrome, and then a low back stress fracture. And that's when I hung up the flag. I was like, no more lacrosse, we're done. But I got away with it when I was earlier in middle school, and 7th, 8th grade. But high school, I was like, I can't take this anymore.
Yeah, that's it. And things like your game time often increases, and the actual demands of your training increase, or each team wants you there more, or you're training for longer periods of time. So all of that begins to increase as you get older as well. So it's not the same, isn't it, not as when you're doing it when you're younger. So yeah, it makes a big difference, definitely.
No, yeah, this is hard because for the girls who want to be on two teams in a season, what would you recommend that they just ensure they get in those recovery days at some point and just pencil it in the best they can? Like how do we solve all this?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy solution, and as a parent of children who insist on doing two sports, I completely understand the challenges here. It is really hard, and I think there's that whole that pressure of if you're not training, or you're not training to 100%, that you're not going to get started, you're not going to get selected for the team. So there's lots of different pressures on young people. And I think as a parent, I think it's quite important that you kind of consider yourself to be the sort of performance manager, if you like, because actually everybody else is seeing your child for pockets of time, and you're the only one who kind of sees the sort of overall picture. So I think as a parent, it's important to think, well, what have they been doing? You know what their, maybe exam pressures are, what all of those things are. So I would recommend that you definitely try and get at least one recovery day in the week where there's no sporting pressure at all. And again, you might want to factor in what they're doing at school as well. So when are their physical education days? What are they doing within that as well? Is that something where they can just go and kind of take it easy, or is that something where there's pressure as well? So planning in those recovery days through the week, and then just being really open and honest with the coaches and saying, look, as you know, my child does this and this. I want to ensure that she's able to be fit and healthy for the full season, so she's available to you the whole time. So therefore, I'm going to, on a whatever night of the week, she's going to miss that. But sometimes as well, I'll say to people, well, you don't always want to be missing the same thing. So if you're doing 2 sports, it might be that one week you miss 1 session of soccer and the next week you miss 1 session of lacrosse, so that you're kind of alternating what you're missing. And also bearing in mind, I think it's just about being a little bit mindful of what the coach normally does in that session as well. So is it that's, really maybe a tactical session that's very much important for your game at the weekend? So is that a session that you really need to be there for? Because otherwise you're going to miss out on key pieces of information. But again, could it be that you're participating in that bit, but you're maybe not doing the higher intensity stuff that's at either end of it, or depending on how it's structured? So I think just as a parent and as a young person, trying to just have those really open and honest conversations with the coach, make them aware if you've had a really hard session with your other sport, and make them aware that look, I'm here, but actually I'm only going to give you probably about 50% of what I would normally do because I am feeling a little bit fatigued.
I think that's great advice, and communication is always key with this. And I think for the most part, coaches do understand when you tell them, hey, I don't want to be overdoing it, or like I'm committed to this team, but I have to prepare for this tournament with my other team. I think when we are proactive with that communication, we feel a lot better about the situation. Everyone can get on the same page.
Absolutely. And I think for the most part, the coach, I think if you were just saying, oh, I can't be bothered coming, that's very different, isn't it? Where if they know you're very active, you're working hard across both of your sports, I think they do respect that. And from my experience, most coaches, if you explain it to them, and actually, as I said, it's very much about, I want to be available for you. I want to continue to do this. Therefore, I need to make sure that I've got these recovery days planned in each week.
Yeah. Nothing sells a coach more than I want to be healthy and available for you. So I think that's a great way of communicating it. Now, let's talk about playing time, because this is a lot of issues with just being on 2 teams. I think some girls are afraid, well, if I miss this practice because of my other sport, then I'm going to get benched for this sport. But is this something people just have to accept? Because look, coaches have their expectations and rules. And it's like, if you're missing practice and then they start you, that doesn't send a good message to the rest of the team. So it's kind of a tough situation for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. It is really tough for everyone. And again, I think it's about being open and honest about that, isn't it? So if the coach has that rule, then we can't expect them to bend it for us. And I think if we think about it, if it was the other way around, if there was somebody else on that team wasn't turning up and you were getting benched and they were getting started, you might see that as unfair. So thinking about it from both sides. But I think, there's this big thing, I think, isn't there, because of the way that professional sport works, and even, grassroots sport, because it's to get the starting position is important, because that sends the message that you are the player for that position and you are their first choice. But perhaps it's about how we frame that as well. So if you're not starting because you've not been at training, but if, chances are they're still going to play you because they value your input in the team. So is it really of detriment to you not to start? Because even if you had started, you're going to potentially be subbed off at some point anyway for someone else to get on the pitch. So how much is it actually affecting your playing time? And actually, is it a little bit more about our ego and feeling like we should be that starting player? But actually, if it allows us, if by being on the bench because we're having to miss the odd training session to allow for that recovery, but being on the bench and being able to go on the pitch is far better than not even being able to sit on the bench because you're injured. So I think it's about how we reframe that for our young girls and think about, well, actually, what is this doing for you and your development? Because we want you to keep playing, and we want you, when you step on that pitch, you want to be able to give it your very best. You want to be able to perform to your, maximum ability. And if you're going on there fatigued because you've not taken your recovery days, even if you're not injured, you're potentially not going to perform as well. And then that in itself could affect your starting position anyway. So I think it's about maybe reframing how we see that starting on the bench. That's not necessarily a negative thing. And it's all about managing to keep you doing what you're wanting to do. And ultimately, that young person has a choice. So if they want to continue to do those two sports, something has to give somewhere, and we don't want that to be that young person.
Right. Yeah, and I think with the two sports in a season, the whole perspective should be, okay, let's do no harm first and foremost, and let's make our decisions based on that so the athlete is healthy and can perform. And there's going to be a cost somewhere, whether that's you miss a practice with one team or you don't start one or two games. There's going to be a cost no matter what, because you can't please everyone in this situation. Like, parents listening, like, let go of pleasing both of the team coaches fully. Like, let's just stop.
Yeah. And that's it. And you don't want that cost to be the young athlete's health. You don't want the cost to be that young girl is injured or burnt out or really struggling with other things in life because she's just so tired and stressed with it all. So if anything has to give, it should be that starting position or that training session, not that young person themselves.
Yeah. Now, I want to come back to just some of the signs of overtraining when kids are doing multiple sports. So I've seen like both ends of it. I've seen some girls be able to handle the loads really well because they're still getting their off days. They fuel properly with good food and enough nutrition, which is also key. But then I see the other end of it where girls are just fatigued. They can't handle it as well. So what are some signs to look out for in that situation?
Yeah, so some of the signs, so that kind of constant fatigue, so almost even if you're getting quite a good night's sleep, you're never really feeling like you've got your energy levels back up. So that's one of the things. Sleep can be disturbed as well. So although you would think that actually if you're really tired and fatigued, you would sleep really well, but often the body's in this stressed state and actually it can be quite hard to switch off. So sometimes they might complain of not having slept very well, even although they're actually, very fatigued. Things like picking up constant little viruses and illnesses, so they might just get over one thing and pick up another cough or a cold, something like that. You also get complaints of little niggles, so it might not be that they've got like an injury that stops them from being able to participate, but they might just constantly complain of different things being sore, and it's not always in the same place. They could be complaining, oh, I've got a bit of a sore heel, or I've got a bit of a sore knee. So sometimes it's just these little niggles that don't ever really kind of properly go away. So it's just that constant stress on the body. Occasionally they'll also get a decrease in appetite, actually. So again, just because the body's in that kind of stress state, sometimes they actually have a decrease in their appetite when actually you really want to be making sure they're fueled properly. Sometimes they just lose that hunger. And then the other thing we often see is kind of lack of motivation. So sometimes they're not as up for going to their practice or their games. They're just not quite the same, it's got the same motivation for that. You can see mood changes, so they can become, and again with teenagers particularly, that can become trickier because teenagers we can get different moods with teenagers anyway, but what's normal for your child, what's their normal mood like. So actually, are they becoming a little bit more emotional about things? Are they struggling to just keep calm in different situations. You might even see that on the pitch as well, where they might become either overly frustrated at something where that wouldn't normally be their response, or they could be overly emotional, or that you might just see them pull back and not kind of put themselves in there as much. So it can affect their performance as well. You can see that drop in performance as well sometimes.
Yeah, those are really good to keep in mind. And for the parents listening, if you see any of these signs popping up for a few weeks, really take them seriously and maybe give an extra recovery day or just cut back a little bit or don't
Yeah,
add that extra skills training or whatever. It's not going to
exactly.
help.
Exactly. And like what all of these things, the quicker you pick up on those first signs and you give them those extra recovery days, you can often prevent it from turning into anything that's going to have a longer lasting effect on them. So yeah, the quicker you can pick up on it and just give them that rest, good sleep, good nutrition, good hydration,
Yeah.
and let them recover.
Yeah, I've definitely seen girls who are on top of those things like good sleep and hydration and nutrition. They tend to fare better with
Yeah.
2 sports in a season. So please stay on top of this, you guys, because you will be able to handle things a little bit better and
Yeah.
recover faster too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Recover faster, perform better because
Yeah.
your body's actually fueled and ready to go again. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Now you mentioned something about rec, and I think that's a good suggestion. Like maybe if you're going to play for one team, do like a travel team, and then your second sport might be a rec team or the school team, because oftentimes with the school teams, I find that these practices, it's not that serious. I mean,
No.
most girls I work with who play another sport, the school practices, there's a lot of standing around, or it's not as hard or
Yeah.
intense, which I think is fine in this situation. Even if the sports overlap a little bit, like soccer and lacrosse or flag football, if the practice is easy, then there's not as much running and cutting. So I've seen that be okay. Would you
Yeah.
recommend don't be on two travel teams that are
Yeah,
super
I
demanding?
mean, yeah, the travel teams sound like we don't quite have that the same thing here, but yeah, the travel teams, from what I understand of them, I'm not sure how you could manage to do two. To be honest, I think that would be even as a parent, how you manage to do that. That must be very tricky. But I think yeah, the demands that would put on your body, even just with the travel and fitting in all of your schoolwork and things like that as well, that's got to be tough. So I would say, yeah, you want it if you're doing the 2 sports to have two that are at that level would be very, very tricky.
Yeah.
Definitely. And yeah, I don't think it would be beneficial to the young girl's development either. She's not going to gain from doing that. She would be better spending that time doing either maybe a recreational sport if she wanted to do something else, or to look at doing some really, good strength and conditioning work.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing I found too is a lot of girls who continue the strength and conditioning work during all of this, but they still get their rest days, of
Yeah,
course. They tend to fare better too, just because
yeah,
their muscles are more resilient to the fatigue, which is great.
yeah,
So
that's right. And it's a different kind of stress as well. So it's not
yeah,
it's not the same kind of loading, it's not the same repetitiveness. You're kind of doing that more kind of all-round development, aren't you, if you're adding that in as well to build that resilience.
yeah, and it's much lower impact too, which
Actually, yeah.
it's a little bit slower, more technique focused.
Yeah, yeah, that's
So
it. So yeah, that's it. So the load on the tissues is very different. Although you're still working hard, it's in a very different way. So it can complement it if it's done correctly and planned in well. It can complement it really well. Yeah, definitely.
yeah. Now, I have one more question. So I get asked a lot by some of my girls, well, I'm playing multiple sports now. A lot of them are middle schoolers, which is great. They ask, when do I pick one? And my answer is usually, you'll know the day when you have to pick one because it'll all hit you, I feel. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it will. I think you will know. I think it will hit you. I think it's different for everybody. If we're talking about soccer, it's a slightly later specialisation in terms of when you would become if you were thinking about trying to go pro, it would be a little bit later than some other sports. So some sports require you to specialise that little bit earlier. So I think, but I think it's all about, how well is your body coping with it? And how well are you coping with it just in life as well? So I also think it's really important that you still have time for friends, for just chilling out, for going to the movies, all of those kind of things are really important, because we want that young person to be a really, well-rounded young person who feels that they've got all of those social and emotional connections as well. And that everything's not just based around the sport. So I would say it's about, if you can maintain that throughout, then, but that might be different for different people. It might depend even on the particular team that you're playing on and the demands that that coach or that team are putting on you. So again, that might be different for everyone. Sometimes it will depend on training nights. So I've seen that be the thing that makes the decision for some people as well. So maybe they'll move up an age band and the training night or time will change and they can no longer get to both practices. So sometimes that forces a decision. But I would say that, most of the research out there is looking at trying to specialise later. But it's that whole early specialisation is not seen to be the best thing. And there's lots of things out there about making sure you've got lots of other things going on in terms of creating that good movement, and that good competent movement all round, not just for one sport. However, if you're doing multiple sports, that can be just as risky as early specialisation if it's not managed well. And early specialisation, if it's in a good environment, can include lots of those other things as well. So I think it's a really hard question to say because it can be quite individual and depending on the environment that you're in. But I would say, for the vast majority of people, you will begin to, like you said, when it was you get to the point where either you begin to start to feel those niggles and injuries and think, my body isn't coping with this, I need to make a decision, or other things in life begin to get too much. So, for example, school pressures, and you can't juggle that at the same time as these two sports. So quite often there's other things that end up impacting your decision. But generally, most of the kind of athletic development models suggest sort of into kind of mid to late teens for females to look at beginning to hone into maybe one sport. But with the caveat that, in my opinion, that should include strength and conditioning as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is so nuanced with the early sampling versus early specialization debate. Obviously, there's a lot of research on the dangers of early specialization, but like you said, if it's managed well with a good athletic skills program and strength and conditioning, that can be better than sampling and playing for so many different sports in a season if that's not managed well. So
yeah, absolutely,
individual.
absolutely, because it's very individual, and it's down to the load and how your body is able to cope with that load and the pressures that you're putting on it.
Yep. Yeah, I
and
agree.
I think that can happen in both environments.
Yeah, 100%. Now, is there anything else you would just want to leave the sports parents with? Any advice?
I think, very much kind of think about, so try and kind of plan ahead a little bit. So look at, what does that young person's schedule look like? And I think sometimes it can be really useful to sit down and actually write that out with the girl and say, right, Monday, Tuesday, go through every day of the week and every element of physical activity that she does, including school, so that you can really see. And sometimes when you actually, although you're taking them to all of these practices and the competitions and things, sometimes when you write it all down and you put how many hours they're doing, sometimes I find that parents actually get a bit of a shock when they see it written down like that. And the young person often does as well, because even they sometimes don't realise, quite how many hours that they are doing. So I would say sit down and work out what exactly are they doing, so that you can see, and then look at, if you're not able to watch practice or you're not sure what that practice consists of, maybe ask the girl, what do you normally do on a Monday night at soccer training? Is that normally kind of skill based? What do you normally do then? And then kind of go through that as well. So if you're then noticing that she's maybe got a few sessions that are lots of kind of high load, high intensity, that are all back to back, that's where you might want to go, right, well, one of them each week is going to be our rest and recovery day. And then very much speaking about that plan with your coach. I think that is key, is to just really have that open and honest conversation. Quite often, the young person will not want to miss out on anything. And sometimes it therefore falls to you as a parent to actually say no. Mm-hmm. And that's really hard. And from personal experience, I know how hard that is, especially with teenagers who are not really wanting to listen so much to their parents. But I think if you can kind of let them understand why you're doing it, and particularly if that young person has actually experienced injury before, that can be a good way to get them kind of on board with it as well, that we want to make sure that you don't end up back there, so this is what we're going to do. And then just, I think very much look at making sure that they've got that recovery planned in, but they've also got some kind of just social downtime where their brain can completely switch off from their sport as well. I think don't underestimate giving them that mental rest as well as the physical. And I think I was reading a blog by Joey Eisenman.
Yeah, I love Joe. Yeah.
So I was actually reading a blog by him, and obviously not being in America, I wasn't aware of this, but he was saying that somebody was telling him, for your collegiate athletes, they have quite specific, and you know this, having been one of them, very specific amounts of training they're able to do, or they're advised to do in season and off season. And he was saying that actually, I think off season they've got 8 hours a week, and 2 mandatory days off, and in season it was 20 hours per week, but that's inclusive of everything. That's all of your gym time, that's your game time. I think actually your game time counted for more hours, and then 1 mandatory day off in the week for all of that. So what he was saying was that actually when lots of these people go to college, they actually end up doing less.
Oh yeah,
which is crazy.
I believe it.
So I think just like having an appreciation of how much they're actually doing, and in comparison to people who are at much more elite levels of sport, who are not going through growth, who are not going through puberty changes, who are not having to learn every day in school and do exams and all of those sorts of things, as well as all of the peer and social things around about growing up as well. I think it's just being aware of the demands that we're actually putting on our young people, and quite often it is their choice, but that's partly because they feel the system, I think, encourages it.
But I would argue most of the parents listening, they can absolutely pencil in at least 1 day off.
Yeah.
And I would say get a second in too. I think most people can do it.
Yeah. One as a minimum. One as
Agreed.
An absolute minimum. Yeah. And 2 would be ideal. And even again, if you can get 1 every week, and then maybe once a month, you can get a week that's got 2.
Yes.
So it doesn't, if you really feel you can't get the 2 in every week, well, can we get 2 in sometimes?
Yeah.
And then just thinking about, and like, do they really need that extra skill session? Do they really need to go to that? Particularly if you've got like maybe a weekend where there is no competition, and you've got the option to go and play in something else.
Yeah.
Because they'll often try and fill those slots, won't they? Either the team or the young athlete and parent themselves will go, oh well, we'll go to that instead then because you've not got that on. So again, use those extra days as that rest and recovery, and maximize it rather than trying to fill something in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Parents listening, you can do it. Recovery
Absolutely, yes,
is
yeah,
your child's superpower. And I
yeah,
do want to refer back to the episode I did a few weeks ago with Raymond Verheyen. He's a professional soccer coach in the Netherlands. And he talked a lot about accumulated fatigue and how that is another risk factor for
yeah,
ACL. So I'm not just talking overuse here. I'm talking the most catastrophic thing that can happen because when you're fatigued, your nervous system doesn't send a signal to the muscles to contract and protect the knee joint. So please get recovery and don't accumulate so much fatigue.
yeah. That's it exactly, because all of your reaction times, even the timing of your tackles, and all of those things are just not quite the same, and that's when you end up having your body in the wrong place at the wrong time, as well as the actual accumulated fatigue in the body having an impact actually in terms of those reactions and responses.
Yeah.
You're just not quite as sharp.
Yeah. Well, this was a great discussion, Tracy, and I think these were such actionable solutions for the parents listening. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I'll leave Tracy's links in the caption below. She also has some great courses coming out, so I'll leave her website and all the information there so you can follow all of her great content and just education around sports parenting and just youth development. So thank you, Tracy, and I'll see everyone next time.